Welcome to Accounting Life with Jotham Tai. Today's episode is How to Save Accounting. Our guest today is Kinman Tong, partner at Moss Adams. On this episode, we look at the factors that caused the current crisis in accounting, what firms are doing to attract and retain accountants, and share some general tips on what you can do to strengthen the accounting profession. Now, our host, Jotham Tai.
Hey, Kinman, welcome back to the Accounting Life podcast. Good to have you back on again. How are you?
Doing well, Jotham. Thank you for inviting me back. It's been a busy time for sure, but glad to be back on the podcast.
Well, I suspect that you may be busy because maybe related to the topic that we're going to talk about today, which is the title of the podcast episode is How to Save Accounting. But what we really mean is how do we keep accountants in this profession? Yeah, I'm definitely hearing from my colleagues in assurance and audit that it has become harder and harder to recruit and keep people at firms. And, so just starting there, Kinman, I mean, broadly speaking, not just, audit firms, but just in the state of the profession in general, like what would you say were the causes for us being in the situation now where accountants are thinking about leaving the industry?
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a big part about why we are so busy and what's going on in I'll say not only public accounting but also in the private industry as well, is that there seems to be a shrinkage in the pipeline of individuals or professionals who want to come into the world of accounting, right? And even finance sometime as well. But it's definitely something that I say started during the pandemic and has just gone a little wild in terms of what's going on. And I think a lot of it has to do with, I think, what the perception of the work of even the CPA in the public accounting or even in the industry as well is, the type of work that they're expected to do or the type of hours that they're expected to maintain. That hasn't so-called changed or evolved over the years, even though technology has changed, innovation has come into play, and also just I think I'll say work culture has also evolved. So I think there is definitely part of that, right, of the reality of it, but also part of it is also the misnomer about what is real. And maybe also expectation gap, right? Expectation of what it means or how the work will be and whatnot.
Well, I'd love to dig into that specifically and kind of add like my theory, I should say. So when I first joined the profession, and I don't have to put a number on it because it's a long time ago and I'll age myself, but it was a long time ago. But when I first joined the profession, I suspected that as an accountant, there would be a good percentage of your day, just working individually on like spreadsheets and calculations, obviously accounting heavy in math. And I expected that as part of my day to day. Hard to say a percentage. I would say I was probably expecting 60 to 70% of my work being, mechanical in nature. Fast forward to today, I don't think the accountants that are in school now have that same expectation, right? It's probably flipped. Like it's going to be a small percentage. Do you agree with that sentiment, or you think that's part of the cause?
I think that is part of the sentiment, right? I think part of it is just innovation and technology should have make things easier and simpler. I think when we started, there were still firms that were using paper audit work papers, right? And so I mean, a lot has changed and evolved, and I think the work has also changed and evolved. But I think there's this expectation, maybe it's just generational, right? Because there's so many more cool ways to make your first $1 million and whatnot, that everyone aspired to be the influencer or the new startup founder and whatnot, that there might be expectation of like, well, why can't I do all the fun stuff without getting the foundation? And then trust me, I was there as a staff where I was like, well, I want to do what you do, manager, right? And part of that was just building the foundation of a lot of the work. But I also think, a lot of the work that, I'll say new staff or whatnot that come in, their work has also evolved because I think a lot of data-driven tools and analysis tool that they do learn, and especially they know from school and they bring in, they become very valuable in that and being more, I'll say, effective and efficient as well.
Yeah.
But a little bit hard to say, there is the whole misnomer, busy season that people still are not very pleased about. Is that why do we have to maintain busy season just because is it we are short of people or what does that mean? I think part of that is the whole work culture in public accounting that will need to continue to evolve because not everyone wants the same thing that we have all been doing for maybe 5-10 years, and even when we started it has changed a lot from our partners and senior managers back then too. So
Well, I'd love to kind of hop on 2 points that you shared there. One is more a fun one. You mentioned paperwork is a big part of public accounting, and I remember those days, like putting together binders and hole punching and making sure they're all tidied up. We all stuffed them in boxes. We had our audit cards,
yeah.
shoved them everywhere. And then scanners came out, and we had those scanners now on top of the audit cards. Always fun to reflect on those days, but obviously times are very different. And you did touch on also, I think social media does have an impact on what's happening here. I think there are influencers in social media that is glorifying or over glorifying like the professional, right? I think in any profession, whether it's accounting, legal, and even my role as a CEO now, there's definitely a part of your job that should be structured, right? And
Right.
routine. Like it cannot be just like, think on the fly every minute of work. But I think the perception that influencers are giving is that your work is really not exciting unless you're running and gunning.
Right.
And yeah, I'd love to get your thoughts
Well,
on that.
I think that that's definitely true, and part of it is the fact that I think in our profession there is a lot of, I'll say, learning and growth, right? I think there's a lot of learning by doing and learning by being a protege or being mentored or very apprentice model, right? Which has also pivot and changed because of the virtual remote environment or hybrid environment because we no longer go to offices all the time. We no longer go to the client side all the time. It does happen depending on industry or I'll say the geographical area that you're in. But they also changed the work culture where it's not as camaraderie where you're all working together in an audit room. It can be pretty isolating when you're like, I live by myself and I work in an audit team, but I'm working by myself.
Oh,
It's
that
just
is such a good point. Kim, I didn't. So I've had these conversations many times now with different parts of the industry, but the work from home, if you're in an audit and you're working, the long hours that you sometimes have to in busy season, if you're doing it alone, isolated, it's less exciting or less tolerable, I should say, than like doing it as a team, or at least you have chemistry between and maybe dinners with your
yeah,
teammates.
right.
So it's made the problem even worse.
Yeah, and then I think part of it is also the whole, the mental health crisis in general is clear, right? I mean, it's definitely harder on people, staring in the screen all day doing calls and whatnot. And trust me, I'm glad that a lot of what I do as as my role as a partner in public accounting firm has kind of pivoted back to a lot more in person, right? The whole networking, the sales, the mentoring and coaching and training aspects being in person is so much. I mean, there's so much more energy in that. There's so much more, I'll say, joy in that versus doing this Zoom calls back to back, where there's a lot of awkwardness in it, but there's also a lot, I'll say, individual, styles and whatnot that you get hindered because you're stuck behind the screen. You're not 100% yourself, and it's more one-on-one. There's no groups there's not as many group settings. So I think a lot of this kind of adds on to it. And I think that's also the same way. I think, even in the industry, I get a lot of questions like, hey, do you know controllers? Do you know accounting managers? Because I cannot find them. right? And I think it's the same issue there because they're like, well, I don't feel like doing the same, closing every month by myself at home, or doing this every month when I could do something else, right? And but I think I don't know, and I say in some ways a good thing is accounting is very stable, right? It's one of the industry that, as far as I know, everyone is still hiring. Everyone still need accountants, be it in public accounting or industry. Like I said, everyone is looking for controllers, CFOs, accounting managers, senior accountants in the industry. That there's just a shortage of that, and I think I mentioned the fact of pipeline. I've been on campuses in kind of a lot of recruiting events, activities, and we can definitely tell that the pipeline of students is also a smaller, a shorter pipeline as well, and that is a concern, right? Because if there's no pipeline, then how are we going to continue to grow, develop individuals, and continue this track? But hopefully, the stability of this profession, which I think with this downturn of economy, with this a lot of these layoffs and everything's going on, and accountants aren't the ones that's being impacted outside.
Well, I think
Help that.
I think what's going to happen, and of course, this is yet to be propagated in the market, but at some point, supply and demand like really catches up, i.e., the lack of supply of accountants will drive more demand, which we're seeing now, which will drive hopefully the value of the accountants, right? So the historical issues we've had in our industry about low compensation hopefully starts changing. And to your point too, these are generally stable jobs. So hopefully that becomes a magnet back for accountants to, or for people to get into the accounting profession. And but beyond that, Kim, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I know you spend a lot of time with folks in the industry as well from your vantage point, but what are you hearing some firms, whether it's Moss Adams or otherwise, what are some firms doing to drive up interest back into the accounting profession?
Yeah, that's a great question. Great point that you're kind of asking. I think the point about supply and demand, the low compensation, I'll say that's not true at all anymore. I mean,
No.
in the public accounting, compensation has definitely been a hot topic and has been, I'll say, definitely more and more on par with what you expect in the industry. Right, and that's a great thing, because I still remember when the new hire or intern compensation has stayed the same for a very, very long time in our industry, and definitely has seen changes and growth there across the board, right? No matter what tier firm you're working for, there's definitely been pivot up to kind of meet that. And I'll say that is the same in the industry as well, the private sector, because everyone needs accountant, and if you need to pay more to steal one from another company, you're going to make that happen. So that is also changing that marketplace too. And the other part is just, I'll say, changes in the accounting world in kind of addressing that. If there are things that could be more efficient and effective using tools or innovation that is available, that we use that, right? I know in Moss Adams, we are definitely going through business transformation where we are implementing a lot of different data analytic tools, a lot of innovative solution and approaches to be more thoughtful in how we get things done, and not be so focused about, hey, what is the number of hours that we're putting into this to get things done? Because ultimately, what we need to do is serve our clients, get the audit done, get the tax return done, provide the deliverables and whatnot. And the more efficiency we can do, it'll allow our people to think more and be able to, I'll say, not grind as much, and be more not creative, but being able to kind of use their thoughtfulness to add more value to our practice, but also to our client, which I think makes it exciting. I definitely see, some of our managers, senior managers, and even staff who enjoy a lot more of the whole discussion. How do we help client with implementation of guidance? Not just how do we do this journal entry to make sure that it agrees for the balance sheet and whatnot. So I think that's how we make it exciting, more impactful. And of course, I think one of the big change in the industry around like ESG and things like that is definitely making it more appealing as well, because you're not just doing numbers, right? ESG is a big thing that is also coming to impact in the accounting and auditing world as well. So.
Well, I'd love to recap those 3 points, and this is why I love having you back as a guest, Kevin. And those are very impactful ideas, and not ideas. It sounds like these are, things that are happening in practice now. One is to just hear that the compensation practices have changed since my time in public accounting. Very important. And yes, I have heard to that point, colleagues now in public accounting echoing the same commitment that it's something to be evaluated kindly and not something to be taken for granted. Secondly, I think there's a fundamental change to your point of the way we look at what we do in our jobs, right? So historically, it's been like get a journal entry or get an audit done. Now it's more oriented around how do I make what I'm currently doing better, right? So that's a much more exciting way of looking at your job. If you can go in and be a part of, how do I become more efficient and effective at doing, whether it's audits or closing the month. So I think that's really exciting too. And I definitely am hearing that, of course, from our customers at Gablify, that, that line of thinking will change the cyclical, boring nature of like the accounting cycles, which, I think is fantastic.
And
And
that's
then
and that's where Gablify come in, right? You are a tool that's going to help solve some of the mundane things that people are like, do I have to just send back and forth this email when there's a bot that can help us manage through a lot of these processes, right? So that I can actually do something that actually will use the best use of my mind and my brain and my expertise. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's a campaign that we're starting to run, and we're pretty transparent here at Gaplify, Kinman. But we obviously see Gaplify as an opportunity to upgrade your tech stack, but it's also an opportunity to do something kind of productive and creative, right? By implementing new systems and by figuring out how to design and configure your own the tech stack that you need to do your job. So yeah, I'm pretty proud about our positioning in the market, and really glad that we're part of like what's driving the wave of the profession, right? Being more strategic and creative versus just like samurai and like let's get stuff done. And that's what I described my job back in the day. I was just like a loyal accountant getting stuff done. I do want to touch on the third point too, and this is something new too. And again, this is why I love having you back on our podcast, Kevin. So ESG, I think the beyond the numbers angle will resonate with a good group of people, right? So if your objective is beyond, accurate financial statements, and there's something more broader beyond that, I think, that should get people excited and people who are thinking about entering the profession. So I'm glad you raised that point. I mean, that's a unique one.
And I think that kind of is part of, I always tell people that, I'm passionate about what I do. And yes, I'm a CPA and I do audit and I do, advisory work and whatnot. But a lot of times I get to be involved in a lot of things that I'm passionate about because of what I do, right? And that is, in my role as a partner in our, not-for-profit education healthcare sector, I get to work with clients who are doing a lot of great work in the world, right? Especially with healthcare and how much a lot of my clients have been impactful in the COVID pandemic and whatnot. And then now in the not-for-profit side, how a lot of my clients are helping with homelessness issue, a lot of anti-hate matters and things like that. It's very real topic that is societal, right? I enjoy it, and I know my team, who a lot of them are passionate about this, also pivot into an industry like mine because they're like, I like that. And that's not any different than the others who are like pivoting into, hey, I like a lot of this fintech world, and that is ever evolving, or cryptocurrency, and part of that is just a appeal of how is that driving the economy or society forward. And yes, I might be doing the accounting or auditing, but in the end, you still are involved in the industry, and knowing and being a part of it is always exciting too. At least, that's my perspective. So
I mean, I have, also echoed those same points. And I firmly believe that accounting is an access point to other interest areas that you have, because every interest area that anyone has an accounting connection to it. So, if you're looking for a career that helps open doors in other areas that you can't normally or wouldn't normally access, I think accounting is a great way of doing it. And I know I'm sounding like an accounting homer now, but it is one of the great things about this industry, and I hope people don't lose sight of that and some of the other points that we talked about today. And then I think there's too much focus on just the negative aspect that are causing people to leave the profession. But hopefully through podcasts like these and having you on, we can highlight the positives that tend to be forgotten. And so, I guess as we wrap up, and this has been a great conversation so far, Kinman, and of course we're going to have you back for more later. But as we wrap up here, I know we talked about some of the things that you're seeing at the firms and in the profession, but let's leave the audience with a Kinman personalized advice. Like, if you're either running a public accounting firm or it's your industry, what are some advice that you would have? Make sure the profession continues to remain strong.
yeah, I mean, that's something important that I think everyone who can leads up a group of accounting, and you're out there recruiting and trying to get your next staff accountant or whatever it is, to remember is just, how do you, make sure that the opportunity that you're providing continues to be something that's challenging and interesting for whoever you're recruiting for, right? And part of that is just, understanding what is needed from this individual. And part of that is customizing careers, which I think is critical, because another big part about public accounting is the fact that it's so flexible, it's so customizable, and the more flexible and customizable and I would say personalized that we can do, the more we can attract talent who want to be themselves and be able to do themselves. And that way allows us to be more inclusive as well in the thing that we do. So I'd say those are key things to think in mind. And if you're not thinking about the people that you're recruiting and retaining, you're not doing your job, and very, very quickly and easily, they'll go somewhere else. Even if you're willing to pay them more, they will find somewhere else that will recognize them for who they are, and they'll jump ship right away. So, yeah.
That's great advice. And I think that ties back to some of the previous points that we talked about in our earlier days. It was kind of just assumed that if you're working in accounting, you do as you've been instructed.
Right.
But in today's day and age, an important point that you raised there, leaders have a bigger responsibility to make sure they partner with their fellow accountants to, customize and figure out where the career paths are going. You can't just expect people to continue the cycles without,
Right.
having some kind of pathway to something successful and exciting. So, I mean, it doesn't surprise me, Kinman, that you have very actionable, practical advice for the audience, which is why it's always a pleasure to have you on. And I'd look forward to reconnecting, and thanks for joining us again on today's show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And this is definitely a very timely and important topic to discuss. And like you said, I feel like I talk about this with clients and peers and whatnot all the time, because it's very real, and it's definitely something that we all have a role to play to kind of fix it or evolve it. So thank you.
Without question, it is definitely one of the top topics in the profession today. So thanks for joining us. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks for stopping by. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you want more information, please check us out at gapify.com, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.